Right, good morning everyone. All bright and breezy this morning, I can tell. Sorry we're a little bit late. Now I think what I'm about to say is not going to be a surprise to a number of you. The Minister for Energy and Clean Growth, Claire Perry, as you know, was due to speak and have a back and forth session with you here this morning. She can't because of what our government's up to on Brexit. She's not allowed to leave Westminster. There's the crucial vote this afternoon. We've had a back and forth with her office about what we should do. Because it was going to be interactive, we didn't really want her to have to provide sort of one of those stayed videos where she just talks at you for 5 minutes. But she did insist, and we're very pleased that she just wanted to apologise. So we've got a very short video from Claire, which we're going to run in a moment. I'm going to come off the stage while we do that. And then I'm going to introduce Baroness Brown. And then, depending on how we go with time, I'm going to warn you about this now, and what I'd quite like to do, you know, you've heard a lot from me already about the sector deal in the last 24 hours. We would quite like to capture some of your thoughts about how we best sell that to the UK government if we have a bit of time. We'll then bring the first part of this first session to a close. I've got to leave, and then Baroness Brown and her panel are going to stay on for the second half of the session. I hope that makes sense to everyone and you understand why we've done what we've done. I do want to say something about how supportive Claire is of our sector. You know, one of the things I get to do on your behalf in this role is to meet ministers and to meet their advisors, and sometimes they sort of damn you with faint praise, they brush you off. There isn't really the authentic enthusiasm for what you're saying to them that you might hope to hear. That is not the case with Claire at all. I know from my conversations with her and with her officials on her behalf just how supportive she is of what we are all doing, and how crucial she thinks we are in delivering what she wants to deliver on the low-carbon economy. So, you know, I want to land that with you, please. Without further ado, let's hear from Claire Perry.
Hello, I'm the Minister for Clean Growth and Energy in the UK government, and I'm really sorry I can't be with you at what looks like it'll be a fantastic conference talking about the global offshore wind industry. I hope you have a great time. But I am here to tell you to keep up the fantastic work. Offshore wind has been a brilliant success story for the UK, both in terms of renewables. I'm checking the app today, on Monday, we're up to about 20% in the last 24 hours. Most of that is coming from offshore these days. But also in actually exploring those opportunities overseas. So we have the largest installed wind base now in the world. We have the world's biggest wind farms opening. They are bringing forward wind at a greater scale and at a cheaper price than we ever thought possible, thanks to this great combination of policies and auctions and innovation. And to that we are saying thank you to you today out there in the industry, because not only are you innovating, finding ways to drop costs and improve production in the UK, you're also investing in the supply chain. So we've got factories being built in places like Humberside to produce turbines, we've got great information management, we've got a whole supply chain building up, and you're now taking that globally and helping the world with its own offshore wind investments. Indeed, I think we're going to be hearing today about the investments in Taiwan, where companies like CJAX and JDR are actually making investments in delivering help there. So a great success. Let's keep it going. I'm sorry I can't be there, and have a fantastic conference. Thanks.
Now, so the next bit of this morning is a real privilege for me, because the next speaker who I'm going to introduce, I'm lucky enough to meet on a fairly regular basis, because we're both members of the board of the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. Baroness Brown of Cambridge has a fairly remarkable list. I mean, Luke, who many of you know who works for me, has done me a list of bullet points about what I might say at this point, and frankly they're a bit long. They're longer than that list of places around the country I was talking about yesterday. But I do want to highlight just a few. Baroness Brown is the Chair of the Carbon Trust. She's Vice Chair of the Committee on Climate Change and Chair of the Adaptation Subcommittee. She's the UK's Low Carbon Business Ambassador. She's a member of the World Economic Forum. A decade ago, she produced the King Review for the Department of Transport on decarbonisation and transportation. And much more than that, she is, as a number of you will have heard me say before, she's one of our country's most brilliant engineers. An academic career at Cambridge University, business and engineering roles at Rolls-Royce, Director of Advanced Engineering for the Industrial Power Group and Engineering Director for the Marine Business, Chief Executive of the Institute of Physics. You can tell. She chairs STEM learning. I mean, you know we've got the Orsted Skills Hub today. She chairs STEM learning, a not-for-profit that supports science teachers and getting industry and business engaged with STEM in schools. She's a Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering and of the Royal Society. So, given that, we are incredibly lucky to have her as our champion for the sector deal. It is my great privilege to welcome to the stage Julia King, the Baroness Brown of Cambridge.
Thank you. I seem to be making all sorts of ominous crackling noises. Well, it's a great pleasure, actually, to be the sector champion for offshore wind, and I feel very honoured to have been asked to do this. So, I'm going to tell you something you've probably heard before. I'm going to tell you about the sector deal. Actually, I should say the reason why Claire is not here, obviously, is because the EU withdrawal bill is back in the Commons today. As I was sitting on the train coming here this morning, I got an email to say the EU withdrawal bill is back in the Lords this afternoon. But fortunately, they don't think we'll get it till 7:30, so I should be back in time anyway on the train I was planning to take. But it nearly scuppered Hugh's first session completely, I have to say. Anyway, that looks reassuring. That's a slide I recognise. So let me tell you a bit more then, perhaps, certainly a bit more than Claire said, about the sector deal, which I think is hugely exciting. So I'm sure you can now all recite this off by heart. Perhaps I should have covered up the numbers and made you shout them out. But the core of the deal is being able to see a pathway to 30 gigawatts of offshore wind in the UK by 2030. So that everybody knows this is a market that's going to be there. Everybody can confidently invest, knowing that this is going to happen. And of course, only government can give us that sort of line of sight that will give people the confidence that this is really going to happen. So that's the core of our ask of Claire and Bays. The exciting bit about that is then that's bringing nearly 50 billion of investment into UK industry, generating some 27,000 skilled jobs. And as you know, those are really high quality, skilled jobs, many of them technical and engineering jobs, and jobs actually that will give people really transferable skills. So they'll be good in this industry, but they'll be good in all sorts of other really important infrastructure and energy industries in the UK. A real opportunity for the UK supply chain, with a chance and an intent that we will grow exports, hopefully fivefold. My ambition would be that it should be even greater than that. And a commitment to government that delivering the cost reductions that will come with this, this will end up being one of the very cheapest ways of generating electricity. So we'll actually deliver, by the 2030s, it will be delivering reductions in customer bills compared to business as usual. So there's a lot there that the government is going to get out of this, but it does need to give us this clear line of sight and this commitment for 2030 to unlock that. Now let me put my Committee on Climate Change hat on and say you've probably seen from the government in the Clean Growth Plan lots of really positive graphs that show how we have managed to grow our economy faster than the average of the G7, whilst reducing our emissions in the UK dramatically faster than the G7. Well, in the last 5 years, as this graph shows you, that's pretty much all come from electricity generation. And it's coming from primarily taking coal off our system. And we have a commitment to take all the coal off the system by 2025 in this country. But actually, electricity is going to have to continue decarbonising at that sort of rate. We need these other sectors to work a bit harder, transport especially, buildings especially, but we are still going to be relying on electricity to continue decarbonisation at that sort of rate. And even more critically, because actually transport and buildings and industry are going to be relying on low-carbon electricity to help deliver their decarbonisation. So this is really, really fundamental, this decarbonisation of our electricity system. I'm sure many of you will know in the UK, we currently have 5 carbon budgets legislated by our government. They commit us to what is intended to be the lowest cost path to decarbonising our economy. The 5th carbon budget runs out to 2032, and on the Committee on Climate Change we're currently just beginning to work on the 6th carbon budget, which will take us out for the next 5 years beyond that. But we were doing the modelling for the 5th carbon budget about 4 years ago now, and in our models for what we thought were the lowest cost paths, we had a kind of central model which had 20 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. And we had models that said, well, there's a fairly high risk that nuclear will progress more slowly than the government's ambition, and lo and behold, it has. And there's a fairly high risk that carbon capture and storage will not be delivered by the early 2030s. And lo and behold, we're pretty much on track for that. That took us up to about needing about 25 gigawatts of offshore wind in our lowest cost trajectory for decarbonising the electricity system. And that would have taken us to about 30% of our generation coming from wind, 25% from offshore wind. And just to reassure the politicians that Denmark already have 42% wind today, so those aren't frightening numbers for them. However, as Claire mentioned, last year, the CFD auctions for the mid-2020s came in not at the £110 per megawatt hour that we had used in our modelling on the Committee on Climate Change, but at an average of about 60. So kind of almost half the costs we had in our model. So as you can imagine, we have been redoing our lowest cost scenarios, and you will not be surprised to know they come up with rather more offshore wind by 2030 and beyond than we were assuming before. And indeed, next week, we will be publishing we publish every year a report on the progress the UK is making in decarbonising its economy. We publish that to Parliament. We're doing it on the 28th of June. Our new scenarios are in that, and actually they align very well with the ambitions of the sector deal. And that's not because I've been sitting at meetings telling them they have to. That's because actually that's what the numbers tell us. That's what the reduction in cost of offshore wind says is the best low-cost path for the UK to take. So 30 gigawatts, the first ask, is a very reasonable way of getting a low-cost path to decarbonising our electricity system in the UK. And as you can see from that diagram, it comes in at significantly less than the cost of combined cycle gas turbine if we take into account a cost of carbon. And if we can keep on driving that cost down, then it will start to be even cheaper than even the best hopes for CCGT. So today, we've got more than 1,800 offshore wind turbines. We've got 7 gigawatts operational. And as we've heard, we've got 45% of the installed base across Europe. It may sound a bit of a big step to 30 gigawatts by 2030, but having been at the Racebank inauguration last week and having heard from Siemens and Ørsted quite how quickly they can now erect these turbines, actually it sort of seems to be actually quite a small and unambitious step at the rate they were talking about putting them up. It does mean offshore wind would be delivering 35% of our annual electricity demands typically. And it does mean, I think certainly according to our calculations, that we'd be up at the high 50s of renewable intermittent contribution to generation. And I think in our next discussion, there are some really interesting questions about how much can the grid stand? What can we do to make sure this is all going to be compatible? You know, do we still need, against this kind of contribution, do we still need baseload and things? So I hope some of you will stay and hear the panel's views on issues like that. But certainly in our assessment on the Committee on Climate Change, we believe that that's a reasonable figure, and that's at the high end of where we think that the grid can take, but we think it's a very sensible target to be aiming at. So the second bit was about the investment and the skilled jobs that will deliver. And one of the things that I think is really exciting for this, and actually I think one of the things that when we took Claire Perry through this about three weeks ago, really caught her imagination, is what this does for the regions in the UK. This is a map that tells you that the impact on local GDP is almost entirely outside the southeast. And that is where we so much need investment and regeneration of our communities and our industries in this country. We need it in the northwest and the northeast, and we need it around the coasts, and we still need that in Scotland. And actually, this is exactly where these jobs are going to be. It's going to help transform communities, some of which have been having a pretty hard time for many years in this country. So that's a kind of great message for government, and something that really captured Claire's imagination, as did the kind of cluster that's developing on the Humber between Hull and Grimsby, with the Siemens blade factory, with the Ørsted operations and maintenance activity, with the Aura Innovation Hub, with the links to the University of Hull. And it's great to see the pride that community is taking in these developments. Not surprising, but great. And it's, that is, you go around Grimsby Fish Docks, and boy, does that area need investment and regeneration. So this is a really good news story, and I think that's a good news story that the government is going to be very, very proud to be telling with us. And we're thinking there are going to be, clusters like this, 4 or 5 of these clusters as we move to that 30 gigawatt figure and beyond. So hugely exciting, transformational for those communities, and also wonderful on top of that to see what the companies like Siemens in their blade factory have been doing in making sure those jobs go to local people, and also making sure that they employ a really diverse workforce. So if you get the chance to go round the Siemens blade factory, it's very exciting, but you really will see the commitment the industry is making to diversity as part of the sector deal. You really will see that in action at the blade factory there, and it is just very different, certainly from my experience in more traditional high-tech, but more traditional manufacturing factories. We've heard about, Claire mentioned the fact that we have the largest installed base in the world. That's something that is a huge asset to us. We have got more experience of building and operating offshore wind farms than anyone else. That is something we've got to turn into this growth in export opportunities for the UK. And it's this element of how we support and develop the supply chain that also Claire and Bays are particularly interested in. So something that Hugh and the RenewableUK team are very much central to, and something that is a huge opportunity for the UK. And I hope it's not just a 5-fold increase in exports. I hope it's far more than that. And I think if you just look at the new build program, you suddenly start to see Taiwan, China, the US, all of these places that post-Brexit, the government is really targeting that we will be increasing our exports to, you really see that these opportunity areas starting to grow. And I know we have a Department of International Trade store here with export advisors and others at the exhibition. So please do go and visit them, because they're very keen to help you see how we really capitalise on the opportunity that we have. So I think the other message to Claire has been, the time is right now. If we don't capitalise on this advantage we have, everybody else is starting to do it. So at the moment, we've got all this experience and knowledge and the chance to sell it. If we wait too long, everybody else will be developing it, and our unique selling point will have gone. But now is the time, and we really do need that government support now. So a real focus on the supply chain is what Claire's asked us to come back with. So there's the supply chain review with Martin Whitmarsh, which has launched, and we'll be hearing from in the autumn. There's the Offshore Wind Innovation Hub, which has been funded by BEIS, where they've had the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult and others working with them. And they've published now the innovation roadmap, so the kind of pathways, the steps along the way that industry, the OEMs want to see in terms of delivering the lower cost and the innovation in the industry. So those are there for companies and for academia to look at and see the kind of challenges that they can be addressing, and they're very interesting. We've, of course, got the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult there to help SMEs and link SMEs into academic research, and there's going to be the development of a supply chain accelerator. So Claire is looking for, as part of the deal, a really strong pitch from us about how we are going to be helping to develop this supply chain and deliver these 2.6 billion of exports, and how we're going to get some of those technologies like robotics, like AI, that are really outstanding in our universities. How are we going to make sure we get those into our supply chain and we are delivering those sorts of products and services into this industry. And then, of course, a very positive message for voters, which is this is going to deliver reductions in your electricity bills. That's a really good one for politicians, and it's real. I mean, that's what the numbers say. So we're asking government for this core of the ask is we want to see this spine of the pathway to 2030. We want to know there are going to be capacity auctions. We want to know when they are. We want investors to be able to be confident that the UK is a good place to bring their money. We want supply chain companies to know they should be investing in new products, new plant and equipment. We're going to be putting together this bid for collaborative innovation support with bids into the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, working with OREC and Innovation Hub and lots of other partners. We're going to be looking at how do we get the supply chain support in place, and crucially working with government on the skills development, because this is going to be really key for delivering this. And these are absolutely the kind of skills that we want to be reskilling our existing workforce with, and making sure our young people are coming through and having the opportunity to gain. So there you are. That's the bit that you have to learn off by heart. And thank you very much for listening.
So look, like I said, this little sort of 5 or 10 minutes, I was quite keen that we do a little bit of improvisation. It will keep you all awake. And there will be a separate session. Benj, what time is it? 12:30ish in the share fair, which is a smaller group. But what I really wanted, we've got an awful lot of businesses in this room, organisations that are part of the UK supply chain, are winning work, and who might want to tell their story to everyone, especially in front of the Baroness. That is the thought. So if you're feeling brave and feel like talking for 20 seconds, we've got a couple of roving mics. My team are holding them. Can people put hands in the air, please, if you want to pass on either a thought about how you sell this or examples that we can use to land this deal, please? Come on. Someone at the back over there, please. Can you say who you are and where you come from, please?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation, Baroness. My name is Adele. I'm a electrical engineer from McNeal. Just thinking about the big sector deal and the technologies that are going to be involved in that, I wondered how HVDC fitted into that and how that related to the current offshore regime, which doesn't necessarily translate itself effectively to the creation of a HVDC supergrid, which would probably help a lot of future developments.
Okay, so look, let me take that. The issue around off-tows is a standard traditional trade association issue, and we're going to lobby on it, and people are involved in the usual way for us to have an industry position on it, and that's understood. On HVDC, I think that's a question. Okay, so that's a question for companies who might want to use those sorts of cables or not. And you know, if there is an advantage that can be brought to the UK, going back to my original ask here, if there's an advantage that can be brought back to the UK, then we should grasp it. And obviously, if there's an advantage that can be brought back to the UK in quick time, linked to this deal, we should grasp that too. Okay? Anyone else? Come on, please. Someone else at the back. This is a chance to sell your companies.
Thank you, Hugh. Steve Smith, I'm the Global Wind Farm Sector Lead for Thales. Looking at RUK figures, you go to this stand, you'll see some very good analysis.
Yep, that, by the way, that's free to any member. That's free to any member. If you're not a member, come have a look at the analysis. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we're one of the members of RUK's aviation working group for this reason. It looks like about a third of the offshore wind capacity we need to have in the next few years. About 3 gigawatts out of the 10 are compromised by planning objections, some of them from various ministries, without naming names. How do we advance those cases and get people to understand this is strategically important and that we need to work around the reality of wind instead of trying to avoid it?
So again, that is standard trade association stuff. We have groups that work on that. We have people who work on that. And obviously, I've got to be careful. There's journalists in the room, aren't there? Yes, okay. In which case I have to be careful what I say. But it is our job to work on everyone's behalf and to balance, to make sure that we can get our projects away within the planning framework. That's what I can say in public. But I will say one other thing, by the way, that I think that we're getting better at that as an industry, at engaging with and working with people who have previously been perhaps a bit more sceptical or a bit more critical about our infrastructure. And we've done a lot of work as an industry in collecting the data to help them to move with us through the journey. But you know, if at the core of the question is, can we continue to do more and can you continue to support the association in driving forward this work and the partnership working, then the answer to that, of course, is yes. Please, can I get some companies, though? Julian, at the front. Can someone quickly come up here? Thank you. Yeah, we're going to need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you again from myself to the Baroness for the speech. So Julian Brown, former chair of RenewableUK, so many of you know me. I'm here actually representing, in a non-executive capacity, 3Sun, who is a supplier of technicians to the offshore sector based out of Great Yarmouth, both in the UK and export, and also Techmark, who some of you may be aware of, floated today, making cable protection systems for subsea cable where it leaves the ground and joins the turbine for oil and gas and for offshore wind. So the line in your slides, which hits many of us in the room the hardest, is pipeline visibility. So my question to the Baroness is, does the government really get that? This is the biggest issue for everybody in the sector in terms of really planning our business, planning our investments, pitching the right level of training and development for people to supply the industry. Does the government really get that? And what is the vehicle by which you're hoping they might actually feed that back to us in return for all the gives that we're giving within the sector deal?
I think the government does get that. I think Claire is looking at, you know, how do I sell this to the Treasury? So, and the things that I think she needs there are the things about what this does for UK supply chain, what this does for UK exports, and the fact that it, at the end of the day, is going to deliver low-cost electricity to families. You know, she needs those, if you like, political messages in order to get that commitment to this long-term, this to this pipeline. In a way, the money's there. We know that the Treasury is under a lot of pressure. We know that the Chancellor has said there won't be money for anything except the NHS. But there's a really good business case here for committing the long-term supply chain. There's the tax that all those 27,000 people are going to be paying in these well-paid jobs and things. So she needs those messages, and I think there's a huge kind of actually an emotional attachment to looking at how do you exploit technologies that we've funded in the UK over many years. Robotics in support of doing really clever things in the nuclear industry or something. How do we enable those firms to start making money in this area and address the export market? It's the overall picture that we've got to give her.
If I can put my old bureaucratic hat on, having been involved in those conversations in the past, the other thing, the fight between departments and the Treasury, it's not like that really. If we can show how much more you get as a country from going to 30 rather than 20, and how little additional cost there really is because of the learning rates and the volume and the certainty around investment and all the other things that we've been talking about in the last 24 hours, then the case should make itself. And I think that that's possible.
And indeed, I would say the new modelling we've been doing on the Committee on Climate Change, clearly this is cheaper than the other alternatives we had for meeting our fifth carbon budget. So it should be a no-brainer, but it still needs to catch the imagination of the human beings around the cabinet table.
Thank you. Hello, yes, it is working. Is there any thoughts on how it might be expressed, a pipeline visibility, a frequency of auctions, or an aspiration for volume? I'm just understanding how we might hope to hear that.
I think that's for the industry to tell me, not for me to tell the industry.
There are conversations about what the right way is for the industry position on that. But clearly you need to have visibility. It's not just from a Whitehall point of view, the provision of the money in some people's minds provides the certainty. Of course it doesn't, because it's not guaranteed and we don't know how often it's going to run. So we need to have that conversation. I'm going to have one last crack at this. I've got 30 seconds left, I think. Does someone over here? Thank you very much. I know who it is over there. Just one example, and then I'm going to draw this part of the first session to a close. Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Goulden. I'm a partner at Wilkin Chapman Solicitors. We're headquartered in Grimsby. Delighted to hear your comments about the Humber cluster, and you're perfectly right. We are enormously proud of what we've achieved so far, but you can also see how far we need to go. Mm-hmm. And really the question is, you've travelled to Grimsby, you've experienced how difficult it is to get there by land. We see a dichotomy of all these wonderful things going offshore, yet how can we ensure that Grimsby and also Hull are fully part of the Northern Powerhouse agenda? We have to match the offshore development with the onshore infrastructure in order to maintain and keep all of the skilled workforce that should come to the area.
Absolutely true of the north. It's equally true if you're trying to go down to the Isle of Wight and see the MHI Vestas offshore wind factory. It's equally true for all of the different parts of the country. It's equally true for people trying to get back and forth from this conference at the moment. But the point is well made.
And I think Lord Haskins actually is doing a fantastic job for you on that. He is such a strong and powerful and proud voice, and he is doing a very good job of getting around and getting his message, or getting your message heard. Yeah.
All right. At that point, this is the last time I'm on this stage during the event, I think. Can I just repeat some of the things I said yesterday? I am so pleased that all of you really have embraced the way that we've been trying to do the event and the conference this year. We're trying to do something different. Thank you for embracing that. Can I extend my personal thanks to the Baroness for coming up? It is a very big political day, so We're very, very grateful. We're now going to have sort of a 30-second handover while members of the panel come up and get some more chairs up here for the second part of the first session.
Can I just repeat Hugh's appeal that we've actually got lots of evidence, as Hugh has said, and we can crunch the numbers and we can show that at an average of £60 a megawatt hour, this is really a good buy for the UK. But we actually also need the stories. That telling stories to ministers, catching people's attention. Yes, it's about the hard numbers and the analysis, and that's working well. But yes, it's also about the amazing British companies and the exciting technology that's being used and the things you leave them with that actually they will remember and think that's something we really want to make happen. So do tell Hugh and anybody else, the DIT people and me, do tell them your stories, please.
Thank you very much. Can we show our appreciation in the usual way? Thank you.